Hi, this is Professor Higgins, and welcome to Lecture 3 of our Business Organizations course this semester. Today is kind of exciting because we are going to be getting into our first business entity. This course is a survey of all the business entities that we have here in the state of Florida, and sole proprietorship is the first one. The sole proprietorship is the most prevalent in the state of Florida. There's many advantages and there are some disadvantages, so we will go through that. But first, let's start with a clean definition of what a sole proprietorship is. A sole proprietorship is a form of business that is owned by one individual who controls and does all the decision making, who is solely and personally responsible for all debts and liabilities of the business, and who, the good news is entitled to all of the profits of the business. Now, the sole proprietorship is run and owned by the sole proprietor. It is not only the most prevalent form of business in the state of Florida, but it is also the most prevalent form of business in the United States. Sole proprietorships can be small or large. They can be profitable or unprofitable sometimes. It's not a question of size. They can have lots of employees. So you can have a sole proprietorship that is very large because you can have hundreds of employees. But as long as it is owned and controlled by one person who takes all the profits and at the same token is responsible for all the debts or liabilities, that's what you have. That's a sole proprietorship. That's all it takes. So let's take a look first at the advantages of a sole proprietorship. The first and foremost, the sole proprietor has full management authority. That's to say that they don't need permission. They don't have to obtain permission from any partner. There is no board of directors to answer to. The sole proprietor is able to make all decisions and does make all final decisions. They may go and ask opinions, but there is nothing binding them. They are controlled by no one. They make all of the decisions. So it is an extremely efficient way to do business. There is very, very little bureaucracy. In fact, probably none. There are no meetings that have to occur. There's no minutes that have to be approved of. Once the sole proprietor decides to do something, nothing's really stopping him or her except for how quickly they want to have it done. Another advantage of a sole proprietorship is that a sole proprietorship can do business across state lines. Now, typically in the other business entities and forms of businesses that we're going to be looking at this semester, there's going to be something that has to be done. You might have to file something with the state of another state, the Secretary of State of another state. You may have to ask permission. You may have to provide some information to the Secretary of State or Department of State of that state that you're wishing to do business in, but not a sole proprietor. He can go into another state and just do business just as he's doing it here in the state of Florida. Number 3, this is one of my favorite advantages. We all like to save money. Well, to form and to run a sole proprietorship, it's the cheapest business, it's the cheapest form of business that there is in existence here in Florida. There is low cost of organization. There are no minimum capital restrictions. There are no filing fees. Basically, if you decide that you want to start a sole proprietorship, you can just clap your hands and say, I'm starting a sole proprietorship, and just jump in and take it away. There is one more advantage that I would like to tell you about for a sole proprietorship before we get started with the disadvantages, and that is income tax benefits. And this is sometimes can be sort of a two-edged sword. The income tax of the sole proprietor is reported on his or her personal income tax forms. That means that whatever the sole proprietor makes, that's on their personal income tax. Now, your personal income tax form is what you as an individual take home, no matter how many places you work, or if you just work in one single place. But your personal tax bracket is based on how much money you make. Now, a corporate tax bracket is currently at 21%. So if you make so much money that you, let's say, are in a 33% tax bracket, then that would be a disadvantage to file as a sole proprietor. You would not want to. You would want to maybe form a corporation because the corporate tax bracket is currently 21%. However, in 2015, the tax bracket for a corporate entity was 40%. So you had 40% versus 33%, perhaps, if that was your personal tax bracket, and it would make more sense for you to set up a sole proprietorship. But we'll get into a little more of that in just a second. A special note that I want to say is that the income earned from the business is attached to the tax return on a Schedule C. So you would have a normal tax return like the rest of us, but if you have a sole proprietorship that's earning money, or losing money, then you would, in addition to that, add a Schedule C. The advantage is that the sole proprietor may report certain expenses such as insurance, advertising, and interest to offset their income. So if the sole proprietor makes a certain profit, but then they had to pay for advertising, and they had to pay for insurance, and they had other expenses that they could write off, then that reduces the amount that they would have to pay taxes on. A sole proprietor can establish personal qualified retirement plans for him or herself in addition to the employees. These retirement plans allow self-employed individuals to make tax-deductible contributions for retirement plans for themselves and for their employees as well. Hold on just a second. I just notified that my battery is low and I do not want to lose you guys tonight. Okay. So I put the income tax benefit as a benefit for the sole proprietor, but we'll also talk about how it can be a disadvantage as well. All right. Jumping into the disadvantages, the huge disadvantage and the most scary to me personally is that a sole proprietorship has unlimited liability. And when I say unlimited liability, I mean unlimited personal liability. So if there is a liability, or if there's a debt that's owed by the sole proprietorship, the person coming after, let's say the creditor coming after the sole proprietorship, can take everything from the sole proprietorship itself, from the business, and then additionally it can come after the sole proprietor just as well. They have to go after the business first, but then they can come after the sole proprietor personally and go after his bank accounts and his assets and his investments, or hers. And so that's very scary when you think of the exposure, the unlimited exposure that you have as a sole proprietor. Now, of course, there are things that you can protect yourself with, but a owner, the sole proprietor, is solely responsible for all debts and obligations of the business. Creditors can reach and sue for the personal assets, except for a few items protected by state law. like wedding rings and things like that. Here are ways that the sole proprietor can protect their assets. How you hold your assets, how you hold title to your assets. So let's say I started a business and I was sued by someone for something one of my employees did. And they wanted to, I had a yacht, which I don't have, but let's pretend that I had a yacht. And they wanted to sue and take my yacht because when they sued the the sole proprietorship itself, they weren't satisfied with that money and they wanted more. So they go after my yacht. Well, if my yacht is titled in my name and has my husband's name on it, then it's protected. Similarly, if I have insurance, if I have liability insurance set up on my business, then I am protected as well. The insurance will kick in and they will defend me if my premiums and everything are paid up. And then there's also many creditors when you are when you're a sole proprietor. If you're a pretty small outfit, sometimes you can negotiate with creditors and say, I will do business with you, but I need a contract that says if something should happen and I'm unable to pay or I'm unable to provide whatever, that you will not come after my personal assets. And although it's not common, it's not uncommon either. It happens quite a bit where vendors will agree with each other not to come after each other personally. The second disadvantage in having a sole proprietorship is a lack of business continuity. Business terminates if the owner dies or ceases to do business. Now, in a lot of businesses, if the owner dies, the business keeps right on chugging, but not in a sole proprietorship. If that person dies, then the business dies. So that is a big disadvantage for people who are considering a sole proprietorship. The next disadvantage is that there's no diversity of management in a sole proprietorship. As we all know, two heads are better than one. And so when you have more input from more individuals who have an owner stake, then you tend to get better decisions. Better things are happening in the business the more diverse ideas or people with different backgrounds or just simply different people. They have different views. None of us are exactly the same. And so I always think that although it might not be best for a lot of people to be in the controlling part of making the decisions, but I think that the more people you get involved in the decision-making process and the more views that you have, the more input you have, the better the decision is, and ultimately. The sole proprietor runs every aspect of the business, and if they're the type of person that doesn't take any input from anyone else, then they may not get the input that's needed to run their business well. All right. The fourth disadvantage is difficulty of transferability. Often, a sole proprietor is linked to the person. A sole proprietorship is linked to the actual person who's the owner. So it's difficult to sell because all of that goodwill is related to that person who owns the business. When that person dies, then all you have left are some cash registers and equipment and a building maybe, but you don't have the goodwill that is going to keep the business running at the top. Like people want, the customers are expecting or what they're used to. So there's no assurance of that. So transferability is very difficult. Limited liability is the next disadvantage. just as when you have one single sole proprietor who is the owner and you only have one stream of thought, you only have one stream of capital. So the funds, unless a sole proprietor can borrow, a lot of times when they need extra cash, then they're dependent on their personal assets. So a sole proprietor really, if they need more money, they just have to work harder, because loans, they're going to look at how extended you already are. They're going to look at your personal assets before they give you a loan, the banks and such. And the final disadvantage is the tax disadvantage. If the personal taxable income is taxed at a greater rate than at the corporate level, then you have a problem, because it would be cheaper for you to you'd be able to keep more of your profits if you were a corporation. And we'll talk about taxes a little bit more, and how every year, the tax rate, currently the tax rate is at 21%, and that is set to expire in 2025. So until 2025, the tax rate is going to be stable. But then, depending on, Trump is the one that put the tax rate at 21%, because when it was at 40%, our corporate tax rate was the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And so many companies left. They just fired their American workers and they left and went overseas, where they could set up shop and pay those folks to work and keep more of the profits, and they didn't have to pay the high taxes. Then when President Trump came into power and he pushed through the 21% corporate tax rate, all of those not all of them, many of those businesses came back, because then it was cheaper for them to do their business here in the United States than overseas. So we have a lot of them back, but really just depending on the wind, almost depending on how the government is feeling, it may or may not be in your client's best interest to have them set up a sole proprietorship or not. So those are when you are making this decision, or when your client is making a decision about whether to set up a sole proprietorship or not, you, of course, are going to look at the advantages and the disadvantages, and then you'll make a decision. And if someone says, yeah, okay, I think, I am a control freak, I do want to be in charge, I'm fine with that responsibility, I want to go forward, and then you start to form the sole proprietorship. Now, I always think of sort of a maverick, a cowboy. The personalities that really do well with sole proprietorships are fun personalities. You will really like this person, you'll really like this client, but you will have to really sit down with them and discuss the personal liability aspect of it. But let's say, okay, you've done that, and they've said, yes, I want to go on ahead, I want to start this sole proprietorship. So there is not one particular Florida statute that lays out A, B, C, D, E. These are the steps for forming a sole proprietorship. But we have set up in the notes, I have set up in the notes for you, how to form a sole proprietorship. And this is the place where all other entities will kind of jump off of. They might have statutes that are setting them up, but for a sole proprietorship, there is no, I can't send you to a statute and say, okay, that's what you do. So the first thing I want you to think about when someone is setting up a sole proprietorship is that you need to figure out whether or not you need to file for a fictitious name. And if you do, you file for a fictitious name, you're going to do it pursuant to Chapter 865.09 in Florida statutes. You go to sunbiz.org, which is one of those websites that I asked you to look through last week. A fictitious name is any name under which a person transacts business in this state other than his legal name. Now, it also does not apply to businesses who are already registered to conduct business in Florida under their corporate names, partnership names, or LLC names. But what I want you to remember for this, the first part, right out of the gate with the fictitious names, is that if the name of the business has a name that is the legal given name of the person who owns the business, then you don't need a fictitious name. If it's not, then you do need to file for a fictitious name. Let me give you an example. I'm going to open a business and it's going to be called Stephanie Higgins Nail Salon. Or how about this? Stephanie Higgins Dog Food. I'm such a good cook that I've decided to open a dog food business. So if my business's name is Stephanie Higgins Dog Food, then I do not need to file for a fictitious name because my given name, Stephanie Higgins, is in the name of the business. However, if I go, well, gosh, Stephanie Higgins Dog Food, that's not very exciting. I'm not sure I would buy dog food from a company called Stephanie Higgins Dog Food. How about, I'm thinking Yummy Bites Dog Food. I'm going to call my business Yummy Bites Dog Food. Well, my given name is not in the business. My name is not Yummy Bites. And so that would require I would have to file for a fictitious name. Now, here's the catch on fictitious name. If I look it up, and I have some places for you to check in Trade Names Directory, www.infoseek.com, the Secretary of State's office, because I want you to advise, or I want you, if you're starting a new business, to check and see if your name that you've picked, mine being Yummy Bites, if that is going to have, if it's a name that's going to be shared with like 14 other businesses. If it's shared with 14 other businesses, I may change my mind, because think about it. If I'm Yummy Bites Dog Food and there's a bunch of other Yummy Bites Dog Foods out there, what if their creditors are after them? They could come after me thinking I was the Yummy Bites Dog Food that they're having a problem with, when actually it's one of these others. So I always recommend to clients to get a name that is not currently being used. In fact, I don't even like to recommend to my clients, let's say there was a Yummy Bites Dog Food, but their fictitious name filing expired about a year ago or 6 months ago. Well, if they have just gone out of business, they very well might have some creditors. And if I pick up that name saying, okay, good, I'm the only Yummy Bites now, those creditors, when they look them up, are going to find me and come after me. So I like to recommend to clients, don't take a name a fictitious name that is already being used or has been used within the last year. So that's just my free advice. Although it's legal to do so, it's not a good business practice. All right. The purpose of the law is to provide notice to one dealing with a business of who is the real party in interest. It does not give the registrant a right to own that name, nor does it affect trademark, service mark, or trade name previously acquired. So before you get business cards, you want to think about, make sure that business is not being used by someone else, because if that business gets sued and the people that are trying to sue them, the plaintiff, is looking up that business and you've thought, oh, I love that name too, I'm going to use that name as well, then you have a problem if that person sues you, which this happens. So it's just a free tip there that I'm giving you. All right. The steps to obtaining a fictitious name are pretty straightforward. As of July 2009, if someone is going to apply for a fictitious name, they must advertise at least in one newspaper in the county where the business will be located and say, I am Stephanie Higgins, and I am filing for a fictitious name, and the name being Yummy Bites Dog Food. Then you go to sunbiz.org and file online. You pay a $50 filing fee, and then I think there's another $30 that you pay if you want a certified copy sent to you. And you might need the certified copy if you are going to be taking out a loan. Sometimes the banks need that. So you may need it to file also for business tax receipts at the county level. Then, once you have your fictitious name, this is valid for 5 years. After the 5 years, though, you'll have to renew. If you don't comply with getting a fictitious name, then there are penalties. The biggest one being that you can't sue anyone in the state of Florida if you have a fictitious name and you have not registered it. Also, it is considered a second-degree misdemeanor. So it's officially a crime here in Florida, punishable by imprisonment of up to 60 days and a fine of $500. So if you do not have a legal name in the title of your business, then you do need to file for a fictitious name. Let's see, the next thing that you would do when you are setting up a sole proprietorship is you need to obtain appropriate state licensing from the Department of Professional Regulation. If you are like a talent agency, or if you are a bar, or if you are maybe a hairstylist or cosmetologist, then you need to get this the state licensing. Now, if you are an attorney, or if you are a physician setting up a business, a sole proprietorship, you are regulated by private licensing agencies. As you know, in Florida, attorneys are licensed by the Florida Bar, so you would not have to have this type of licensing. And generally, if it's not you, if it's a client, your client will know who licenses them. So always make sure that you contact the Department of Professional Regulation and see if your client needs to get that state licensing. The third thing is to obtain local business tax receipts. Now, this is under Florida Chapter 205. Counties and municipalities may levy this tax for the privilege of doing business within their jurisdiction. So if you are in the city, many times you are in a municipality and the county, so you are going to have to do both. And it's very important to know which one to do first. Generally, you go to the city first and get their local business tax receipt, and then the county. The goal of these receipts is just generating revenue for the city or the Orange County. And I wish I could tell you that it's going to be $50 or whatever for this, but depending on the type of business and the number of employees that you have or your client has, this can cost between $30 and $450. It's valid for 1 year, and you have to get it every year. So you may need to get one from the city and the county, and you must file annually, and then make sure that you display that license in your place of business. So you actually have to go. I've got the steps written out in your student notes. You go into the office. There's no electronic filing yet, but I do think after the first time you go in, I think when you renew, I think you can do that online. But as of now, if you are setting up a sole proprietorship, you would go into the office. You show the fictitious name if you have one, if you need one, because you may not. Remember, if I stick with Stephanie Higgins Dog Food, then I don't need one. But I think I probably would do Yummy Bites. So I'm going to take my fictitious name in, and I'm going to show them that I have my fictitious name, and any other licenses that I might need to have, and then I will pay. They'll tell me whether it's going to be $30 or $450. Then I go back to the office or I go back to my business and I I display my license. All right, if you don't put that back up, if you don't make that trip back and tape it in your window or put it in a frame and hang it on the wall, you can be fined for non-compliance. So make sure that your client realizes that. All right, you pay local and state and federal taxes. So if employees are involved in your business, you must complete and file a Form SS4 with the IRS. This will give you your employer's tax ID number in return. So once you have that, that's like your business social security number. So once you file your SS4 because you have employees, then you will get your tax ID. State sales tax permits, if taxable products are sold, are also required. So just as, if you're selling an actual product, which if I were selling Yummy Bites dog food, I would be selling bags of dog food and I would have to charge taxes on each of those bags sold. So then the government wants the state of Florida says, okay, we need those taxes, and we don't want to wait a whole year like the feds do on your personal income tax. We only file our tax returns once a year for federal income tax. But the state of Florida, if you have sales tax, then we're going to want that on a monthly basis. And so you tell the state of Florida that you are going to be selling Yummy Bites dog food. They say, okay, the thing that you file is called a DR1, and that's filed with the Department of Revenue. It can be online now. So you file that. They send you back this little coupon book that you will send in all of the taxes that you earned each month. All right. Then, so now we've gotten taken care of the state. Of course, now the federal income tax come along. As we mentioned before, we would report all income on Schedule C, and you would attach that to your personal income tax. But more than that, they, again, just like the state doesn't want to wait for the Yummy Bites dog food once a year, they want it monthly. The feds want their taxes quarterly. So each quarter, a Form ES 1040 must be filed along with the payment of 25% of the amount of income taxes and Social Security taxes estimated to be due. So really, at the end of the year of last year, you look at all of the taxes and Social Security taxes that were due, and you just divide that by 4, and then every quarter of the following year, you send that amount of money in. If you have any questions on any of this, you can go online at irs.gov, or you can call, and I have the IRS number in your packet for you. Actually, it's not a packet that I hand out anymore. It's a packet that is your notes that will be found in your modules. Okay, Employees Withholding Allowance Certificate. The IRS Form W-4 each employee needs to complete in order to calculate the amount of federal taxes to be deducted. So I don't know I'm sure if you've ever had a job before, I'm sure most of you have, then you have to do the W-4 and you figure out how many dependents you have and you put that in. And then your employer is able to figure out how much to deduct from your paycheck, so that hopefully at the end of the year you don't have too much taxes to pay. That's just another responsibility that the sole proprietor would have to do, is to get those W-4s so they can figure that out. Federal excise taxes. Now, don't you feel like you've paid a lot of taxes so far, or you're having to keep track of a lot of taxes? On top of that, not everybody, not everybody pays excise taxes, but there are additional taxes on certain activities. If you choose to do business with the following activities, then not only do you pay all the taxes that we've just discussed, but you also have excise taxes on things like tobacco, alcohol, gas, tires, some trucks, firearms, ammunitions, bows, arrows, fishing equipment, aircraft, wagering or gambling, telephone. You can even look at your telephone bill and see the excise taxes. Coal, hazardous waste, and of course, vaccines now that we're in this pandemic. Okay, so not everybody pays those, just these businesses that do this type of stuff I've just mentioned, but not everyone has to pay those federal excise taxes. Unemployment compensation taxes. If you've paid wages, if you're U.S. Mr. Sole Proprietor, I'm talking to now, if you have paid wages of $1,500 in the last or in any quarter in the previous year, then you have to pay federal unemployment compensation taxes. Or if you had one employee for 20 months or more, then you also have to pay unemployment compensation taxes. G, if you own property, you must annually pay ad valorem taxes. These are taxes on real property. So if you have a business and let's say you're not renting, you went out and you bought a piece of property and you built a building and then you made that your business, you put your business inside, then you have ad valorem taxes to pay as well. H, tangible personal property taxes. This is a tax on all personal property used in the business and on all inventory. This means, and this will make many of your clients very upset, especially if this is the first time that they are setting up a sole proprietorship. They have to pay taxes. They have to buy everything and, of course, pay sales taxes on it. Then, every year, the government looks and says, oh, okay, you still have that cash register, you still have inventory, you still have that carpeting, you still have that Coke machine, all of those things you have to pay taxes on, and that is your tangible property taxes. Those are items that you are using in the course and scope of your business that the government is going to tax. And then just as we have federal excise taxes, we have additional Florida excise taxes. Or excise taxes, not incise taxes, sorry. Florida excise taxes only are on the following items, and I'm just trying to see if I can pull them up here. Yeah. Special Florida tax on tobacco, alcohol, mineral, oil, and gases. So we don't have as many as the feds do, but we still have, if you are selling tobacco, not only do you pay excise taxes to the federal government, on top of everything else, you pay excise taxes to the state of Florida also. All right. So the fifth thing that you need to do as a sole proprietor is to obtain the necessary insurances. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is huge. This is the big one. This is the Mac Daddy. Make your client do it. And if your client is that cowboy attitude that I don't need any insurance, I don't make any mistakes, everything's done right because I'm in charge kind of guy or kind of gal, you're really going to have to sit down with them and talk to them seriously about liability insurance. Because it's not a requirement. I wish they would make this a requirement in the state of Florida. It would make our jobs a lot easier. It is not a requirement except for physicians, but it is often a good idea for premises liability and for product liability. But product liability insurance is very expensive, so people often do not want to do this. So that's why sole proprietors are just a challenge for a lot of attorneys. Okay, Then another necessary insurance is your workers' compensation insurance. If you have one, I'm going to read this so that I get it absolutely right. If you have 4 or more employees in any type of business, or 1 or more employee in the construction business, you must carry workers' compensation insurance. It is a very expensive type of insurance, so many people try to exempt out of it. There are steep penalties, however, for your client if they're supposed to carry it, but they don't. And if they are not sure, or if you're not sure, you can go to the Florida Division of Workers' Compensation, and sometimes going someplace like that so that you can read to your client what the requirement is and make sure they see what is going to happen to them if, these steep penalties are going to be imposed if they do not do as you suggest. All right. So we have workers' compensation, liability, hazard insurance. If your business burns down or is destroyed by natural disaster, especially here in Florida, you're going to want to have hazard insurance. Automobile insurance for your business. Does the business own any trucks or cars? Do you provide any work vehicles for your employees? Health insurance. Florida has a nonprofit organization called Community Health Purchasing Alliance. This helps businesses with 50 or more employees, and I've got the phone number there because that's really something that's come along just lately and is very helpful to small businesses. Liability for employee theft. There is a chance that your business might experience theft, so you should purchase a bond from your insurance company that will protect you. And then malpractice. For certain types of business professionals like lawyers or physicians, accountants, they will need to get malpractice. And these types of clients are very amenable to doing what needs to be done because they understand the risks and the liabilities. Sales tax bonds. The Florida Department of Revenue may require a bond to guarantee the payment of sales taxes. You get this bond from your insurance agent. And then there is also something now called an I-9. It insures you to help you in a situation if you find that one or more of your employees is not legally registered. So this will just cover you to make sure you have legal employees. All right. So that's the gist of how to decide whether to have a sole proprietorship and how to form one, how to set it up. There are some other considerations that I have included in your notes. The first one, under government regulation, the right to pursue an occupation is a property or a liberty within the meaning of the constitutional guarantees that we have. As you know, the government cannot deprive citizens of these rights without due process. Consequently, any unreasonable or arbitrary or oppressive regulation of an occupation violates due process. So, under statute 20.165 of our Florida statutes, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation is charged with preserving the public's health, safety, and welfare under the police powers of the government. Thus, the state government is allowed to set standards. And then there is a municipal Attorney General opinion that says municipalities, which are cities, may regulate businesses in order to preserve the public's health, safety, and welfare. So both of these authorities give the government the right to regulate businesses as follows. They can regulate the time that you are open. They can't tell you what times you have to be open, but they can give you a range. They can say, okay, these are the hours during which business can be conducted, depending on what type of business you have, where you are located, just to preserve the safety and health of the rest of the population. They can also regulate the place and location. They do this with zoning laws so that we have all of our residences over here so people can get a good night's rest. They have maybe all of their businesses over here. They have industrial stuff over here so that the industrial noise doesn't bother the attorneys and the courthouses and maybe the physicians or anyone else that needs a quieter place to function, and they'll be away from the residents as well. Then they can actually regulate business activities. They can say where you can go for a lap dancing. Things like this are regulated by the state and by the city. They can also regulate solicitation of businesses. They can decide what the definition of solicitation is. They want to protect the general public from annoyance. So these other considerations are very important. And then depending on what type of business your client wants to set up as a sole proprietorship or what you want to set up as a sole proprietorship, these are just miscellaneous issues I've included that issues might arise, and the sole proprietor needs to have some type of knowledge about financing, about contract laws. They need to understand and be able to work with contracts. They need to know web development or have someone in their employ who can assist with web development. They need to know about OSHA regulations, health and safety laws. What are the requirements and do they affect your business? Employment and labor laws, advertising and sales laws. You've got to have marketing, you've got to have advertising, but you don't want to break any laws while you're advertising. Payment and collection laws. You don't want to provide services for folks and then they never pay. You need to figure out how you can collect and do it lawfully. Bookkeeping and accounting, and I always just recommend have an accountant. Have someone who studies this and know. If you don't know accounting, then you need to hire an accountant. And then also trademark, copyright, and patent laws, depending on what type of business you have. Now, the first assignment is an online scavenger hunt, and you will use all of the different websites that I've discussed in this lecture. You're going to be doing this online. I do not want you to begin the assignment until you've read the chapters, till you have watched the videos, and you have gone over the notes and made little comments to yourself in the notes. This assignment is an individual assignment. It's not to be done with anyone else. You're not to ask anyone else for answers, including me. The answers, there is an answer for every question. So please be very, very specific because you are now working as a paralegal and you're going to be working, let's pretend that you're working in a corporate office, and these are things that can come up in the workday, and your attorney will ask you to get this answer, and then you'll have to have the answer by the end of the day. All right, this assignment is going to be due next Monday of next week at 8 a.m. And that is all I have. When we meet on our Zoom meeting, please bring any questions that you have, and I am very excited that we will start with sole proprietors, and next week we will jump into some partnership stuff, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm glad that we're on the road now. We're well into our course, and I look forward to seeing you next week.